Okay. Good evening, everyone. Hello. I'm Blue Cease. I'm the executive director of the Rochester Contemporary Art Center, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to today's panel discussion with four artists from our current exhibition, Unconditional Care, Listening to People's Health Needs. And today's program will be moderated by exhibiting artist and curator of the exhibition, Katrina Majkut. Before I pass the mic to Katrina, I'd like to mention a few reminders and certainly a number of thank yous. Most of you are not, some of you may not be from our region. Those of you who are not, I'd like to mention that Rochester Contemporary Art Center is in downtown Rochester, New York, which of course is Haudenosaunee land. More specifically, the Seneca Nation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. To learn more about Seneca traditions and definitely the rich range, the wide range of contemporary Seneca artists in our region, I really want to highly recommend that some of you visit and support our nearby peer organization called Ganondagan. Please, yeah, do so. Learn about the Seneca visual art traditions and contemporary artists working today. Those of you who are from our region, you know that we were founded in 1977. We're the Rochester Contemporary Art Center, and we have a long history of supporting young artists, underrepresented artists, and artists who are exploring our most important and pressing social and political issues through their work. And right now, our exhibitions are representative of this aspect of our mission, including Unconditional Care and a separate, though topically related, public art project called Who Will Be Next, organized by Martin Kraft. This is a social practice monument dedicated to victims of gun violence. And the Rochester community is invited to visit ROCO anytime between now and November 15th and meditate on the humans behind the staggering gun death statistics and contribute to this heartfelt archive that the artists are building. Martin will hold a vigil here for Rochester's victims of gun violence on First Friday, November 3rd. Please visit our website to learn more about this work and our upcoming programs like our members exhibition. Any other artists who are on the call today who don't know about this program, artworks are due for our annual members exhibition, November 3rd, 4th, or 5th. A little bit of brief housekeeping. Closed captioning is available. If you are struggling with that, please just mention in the chat. And also, any questions or comments that you may have, please pop them into the chat. And Jess and Alyssa and myself will do our best to moderate back to those questions after the initial conversation between Katrina and the artists. First and foremost, I want to thank our small but mighty team here at ROCO. Alyssa and Jess are administering the Zoom call today and promoting and doing so many different aspects of what it takes to run an organization like ours and put on an exhibition like this. So thank you, Jess and Alyssa. I see that we have a couple of our dedicated volunteers also on the call. I want to call out Linda and Christina, and I'm sorry if I'm missing someone else who's on the call, but thank you to all of our volunteers who helped to make our organization possible. I want to also thank Katrina for curating just such a terrific, educational, and diverse exhibition. The three panelists for trusting us with their work and sharing their thoughts today. And all of our programs here at ROCO are supported by the New York State Council on the Arts, the Farish Foundation, Monroe County, the Mary S. Mulligan Charitable Trust, and we have about 1,000 members. We're a small organization, but about 1,000 people keep an annual membership here. And if you aren't yet a member, I want to invite you to please join and support all that we do here at ROCO. And again, it's my sincere pleasure and honor to welcome our panelists today and today's moderator, the curator of our exhibition, Katrina. Welcome. Please take the mic.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It was, not to make a medical pun, but a real lifeline that ROCO was willing to take this exhibit on, uncensored. And I am just going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Katrina Majkut. My pronouns are she, they. I come from the unceded lands of the Lenape, which is just north of New York City, but not so north as Rochester. I am known as an embroidery artist. I will be talking a little bit about my artworks in the show in addition to the show as a whole. And yeah, I've started curating over the last few years since COVID, and this is a major exhibit of mine. As you know, the title is called Unconditional Care, Listening to People's Health Needs. And when I came up with the exhibit, it was really taking this idea of how can art address some of the major health topics within the United States. Even before COVID, this was starting to become an issue, from trans healthcare to Black bodies, you know, access to childcare. There's just like tons and tons of issues that have come up with in American politics that have difficulty in getting the accurate representation, to accurately listening to the people that those issues most affect, getting access to the proper health care, the finances to that proper health care. It's a really complex system. And I have been fortunate enough that I come from an area, I come from Massachusetts originally, which is just really known for its healthcare. It was the first place that had the Affordable Health Care Act. And my dad worked in healthcare for 30 years. And so I think I was probably predisposed to do a show on this topic. But I really wanted to give voice to these issues by the people most directly affected by them. I really feel that that's the one thing missing in the legislative policies that are being developed today. They're ignoring medical facts. There's way too much information out there, and it's ignoring the people that it impacts. And so I collected 11 artists for the show at ROCO. It was originally 15. The show is adjusted a little bit to account for just logistics, not because of censorship at all. And yeah, to really collect a powerful group of artists that could address these different issues in their own way. I purposely make sure that the artwork is not protest artwork. I wanted to make sure that whatever was shown was either rooted in medical accuracy or personal storytelling. I think one of the issues with abstract art or post-test art is that it can often make things a little bit more divisive. And I wanted to take whatever political spectrum you are on and be able to design a show that helped raise people's empathy and to give them a chance to come with open ears and an open mind and consider what this other person is going through. So that was really my goal in designing the show. I've got 3 artists here with me. I've got Holland Houdek, Michael Sylvan Robinson from Gays Against Guns, an activist group in the exhibit, and Christen Clifford, who has 2 different series in the show, in one very, very recent. And I'm really excited to introduce them to you. If we could have the artists just share a little bit about themselves, where they're from, what their practice is like, and the artwork in their show, that would be great. I'm going to follow up with questions with them so you can get a more intimate understanding of the artworks in their show. So I'd like to hand the baton off to Christen Clifford.
Hi, my name is Christen. I am delighted to be in this show, and thank you so much, Katrina. and Blue and everyone at ROCO. It's really exciting for me to exhibit my work there. So I'm a feminist artist. I have a long history of working with bodily autonomy. I make film, video, installations, paintings, risograph, lecture performances, performance art. I'm currently working on a book. And I feel like my medium changes depending on the just kind of what's at hand, what I'm working on, but also with where I am as a mother and what's happening in my family, which is really important to me. I have two trans children. One is 20 and one is 14 going on 15. So the work that we're seeing here, right here, this is interiors. How's my video doing and my sound? Am I doing okay? Yeah? Okay. All right. Thank you. So this is the interiors. We Are All Pink Inside. It's an installation that is unique to ROCO. It's a film of 14 different interiors, what I call interior portraits. And that the interior portraits are, for me, they started with myself. I use a sex toy camera to get this kind of pixelated pink. Can't quite see the colors in this on my screen. And I started using them inside myself, and then I started using them inside my friends and colleagues. And so I call them interior portraits. They're of people of all genders and colors and ages. And you can see the bean bags there are also an interior portrait that's made into a pattern, and the pillows. So these I have as, in this installation, I have it as this room where you can sit and watch the video. I've done installations that had a lot of pink plexiglass so that you're kind of implicated in the piece. And I have some giant sea prints and some prints on metal of this work. It's a work that is continuing. It started with something I call the pussy bow, which was, I don't know if you remember, like the pussy bow that all the politicians' wives were wearing. And on a TV show, there was a character who wore a pussy bow all the time. And I thought it would be hilarious if there was a pussy bow made with the picture of an actual pussy on it. So I put one of my interior portraits on silk and made all these bows, whatever. And then my other work that is in this show, previous to this iteration, the iteration that was at Lewis Clark, we used a piece of mine that's called American Dream, which is I also call rape tape. It is it's a reframing of the actual tape that the friends of the boy who raped me when I was 15 gave to me. So that was in the original version. And then the other pieces that I have at ROCO are recent pieces from my recent battle. I'm sorry, I hate that word. I just said it. My recent treatment with breast cancer. So I was diagnosed in December, and these are photos that I took for Instagram and writing. That is very recent. This is all from earlier this year, from March. That's mostly from March of this year. I did this when I had cancer before. I had ovarian and uterine cancers in 2016. To me, it's about educating, showing what it's really like for me, having fun with it, challenging notions of what is acceptable, notions of what is acceptable sexually, the pain of the surgery. The photo in the middle there is with the drains. I had a double mastectomy with a DIP flap, partial reconstruction in these photos. And I've had some more reconstruction since. I think I have consistent themes: bodily autonomy, abortion, feminism, gendered violence, cis and trans and queer identities, motherhood and childbirth, rape and sexual assault, illness and healing, cancer. I think of it, the whole body of work, as being about collective healing and body politics. And I think that something I kind of say, I think about justice a lot. I teach a class called What is Rape Culture? This is something I was playing with about, like, sexuality. Like, am I allowed to be sexy as a cancer patient? Am I allowed to be sexy as someone who's just had major surgery, as someone who's in treatment? And I think that there's no justice, there's no reproductive justice, there's no kind of justice in the world without bodily autonomy, and there's no bodily autonomy without respect for the body, and there's no respect for the body without knowledge of the body. And that knowledge includes menstrual blood and vaginal mucus and cancer cells and breast milk and rectocele and crone cunts, these lady dicks, things that are in my work in other places. So I think I'm going to leave it just with a quote from Judith Herman, who wrote the book Trauma and Recovery. And she, a quote that I love from her book is, "Trauma isolates, the group recreates." And there's something about this show and this group show, to me, that is about, like, a recreation of a collective, that this show in itself is a collective healing. So I'm really just delighted to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christen. That was great. I do want to reiterate that idea of a collective healing in the show, and how your piece interiors really helps facilitate that. It's like a returning of the womb, where you are meant to feel safe and hopeful. And I hope that people can go to the room after seeing the show and find it as a place to meditate and heal and enjoy the beauty of the body, and be amazed in all its wonders. Further next. Oh.
Well, I just wanted to say that after I made the first interiors installation, one of my friends turned to me and said, "You made your own healing space." And I was like, oh, I had no idea that's what I was doing, and I did.
So I'm going to introduce our next artist, which is Holland Houdek, who is actually a Rochester local. Holland is a new addition to the Unconditional Care show. They bring a really interesting element of medical devices meets capitalism. And so I'm going to give it over to Holland to share a little bit about themselves and their artwork.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining the webinar this evening. Thank you to Blue and Katrina, who are, navigating this and preparing this. I can't wait to hear about everybody's artwork this evening. And I'm very honored to be among the many artists in this fabulous show. So thank you there. Again, I'm one of the local artists. I live and work in Rochester, New York. I'm an associate professor at Nazareth University. I teach primarily metalsmithing, 3D design, and visual strategies. And I'm also the art gallery director there. I received my BFA from UW-Wisconsin Stout and my MFA from Syracuse University. So rather than speaking to specifically each of the pieces that you are seeing up on the screen here, I would like to share just a little bit more broadly about all of my different implant series. I have a total of 5 of them, including a body of work that deals with medical instruments. So I thought it would just be more of an interesting approach for me to kind of navigate all of my work and talk about how my work kind of entered the medical realm. So as a maker, my work has always revolved around the body and embodied experience. And this stems from the fact that growing up, I was a competitive gymnast for many years of my life. And I believe it was really that intense awareness of my body that really kind of transcended into my work. So when I was in graduate school, and I'm only bringing up graduate school because it was a really pivotal moment in change in my work. When I was in graduate school, I was making work that would either, maybe reconfigure, alter, or morph the body into alternative positions. But it wasn't until my final year that my artwork started to embrace and kind of aesthetically look more like historical medical devices. So it was at that point where it made sense for me to start reaching out to doctors, to orthopedic surgeons. I started making more connections within the medical community, and my research really took off from there. So post-graduate school, I have actually formed medical partnerships with the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, with Cleveland Clinic and MedWish International, to name a few. And through these partnerships over the years, it was quite an extensive amount of research and work. I was able to obtain hundreds upon hundreds of medical devices. For example, things like heart valves to hip replacements to stents to, as you're seeing on the screen right here, knee replacements to prosthetic legs to surgical tools and devices. I've worked with urologists where I've acquired a number of different penile implants. I've worked with Cleveland Clinic, and they've donated, I think it's around like 36 pounds of reconstructive breast implants to urethra implants. The list really kind of goes on. And I'm very thankful for them because these donations have been crucial to all of my work. Not necessarily in a sense that I'm utilizing them in the work itself. There are times where I will take like a medical instrument and I might hand fabricate sheet metal around it. Or I might incorporate like a breast implant or penile implant if it works conceptually with my work. But those are more for like an alternative material that comments conceptually with the work that I'm making. But mainly, I'm using all of the donations that I received as inspiration to build my work from. Because of course you can look at medical implants online all day, but to me, there's a big difference in actually being able to interact with them. So I would have to say in general, as a metalsmithing artist, I aim to challenge the preconceived notion of what is considered adornment and jewelry for the body and how and where it can actually be worn on the body. So with all of the pieces in this exhibition, the pieces that you are looking at, they are sculptural implants, but they are meant for the body, to be implanted in the body. So as a metalsmith, it's I think an interesting approach to view them as inner adornment for the body. And in general, with all of my work and in all of my implant series, my work is meant for viewers to question the absent anatomies implied by the work, or for you as viewers to be considering your own physicalities, but also furthermore, to be considering, the bodies that might, or these implants might never make it into, because again, there are billions of people around the world that are seeking medical solutions, these surgeries, these devices. And it's pretty incredible the immense privilege that so many people have to be able to have access to these very powerful devices. So that would be my brief introduction of myself.
Thank you so much, Holland. Now I'm going to introduce our last panelist, Michael Sylvan Robinson, who is part of the activist group Gays Against Guns. This is their second time in the show. They have an installation that includes both a wardrobe that Sylvan will describe a little bit better and placards. Take it away, Sylvan.
Hi, I'm Sylvan, and I'm a member of Gays Against Guns, which is a direct action group of LGBTQ plus people and their allies. It's a nonviolent group, and our activism is really about trying to stem this epidemic of gun violence that is so unique to our country. And we do so in a number of ways, but one of the major focuses of our vigil and activist work is what we call human beings work. And so activists dressed in all white, veiled and silent, carry a placard that remembers an individual killed by gun violence. And so the activists are holding space and a remembrance of someone who's no longer here as a result of gun violence. And then we also have, direct actions that target certain kinds of, causes, or trying to draw attention to some of the issues that are impacting our country right now around the gun legislation, particularly. This is me on the left. I'm wearing the garment that's in the exhibition right now, which is called, as you can see in the back, "We honor and remember the 44,895 killed by gun violence in the United States in 2021. And actually, since that garment was completed, the number is actually larger than that. It's somewhere between 45 and 48,000, depending on the research sources. And then you can see the activists along to the right side who are carrying placards. This is an annual action for the Transgender Day of Remembrance. So all of the placards are remembering people, trans people who were killed in a previous year. But last year, this also included the additional vigil for the mass shooting that took place in Colorado Springs as well. I want to talk a little bit about the way that GAG approaches remembrance work and research. So I wake up every day and I read the National Gun Violence Memorial site, and then I start to do a research through media news accounts of gun violence. And there are areas that we are particularly focused on, and domestic violence, which is one of the largest impacts of gun deaths on women and children in particular, is one of the categories that I spend a lot of time considering, as well as particularly the lives of transgender and queer people who sometimes are underreported or misgendered or misidentified in most media. So part of my work is telling in an way through the news media available the stories of people who aren't here anymore. And that really is a daily witnessing. Like basically every day, I spend some time in that. And so far, I've personally researched 400 lives. Gays Against Guns got founded in 2016, and I've been with them for a couple of years. And then when there's a mass shooting or a particular action, we'll do some quicker research to make sure that all individuals who were killed have a placard. And that work is also then taken by a fellow activist who's the designer of the placards in the show right now, Frank Giulio, who's the graphic designer that we work with to be able to put the photos and the text together. And this is a front view of some of the stories that I researched in 2021. This is the second of 3 ongoing garments. I do one per year. That's one of the ways that I sort of ground and release some of the stories that I've held and researched and told. I will say that for the most part, this is always about trying to honor the lives of the people who were killed. And that can be a bit of a complication given the way that news media tells those stories. But that's partially always the goal, is to provide living accounts from loved ones or places of work in a way that empowers and shares that information. I'll just mention that I always like to say that, the number of guns in the country have increased so considerably in the last couple of years, and we're really seeing an impact, particularly on domestic violence and also the suicide rate. And so I think the latest statistics are saying that 22.5 million guns came on the market since the pandemic started, and that 1 in 5 of US households purchased a gun during that time for the first time. So millions of guns, 15 million first-time home guns in the home. And I think there's a lot of ways in which gun violence is different in different parts of the country. Part of the privilege of doing this show in 2 locations is being able to have researched the Idaho women who were killed by gun violence, and then to do a different version specifically to Rochester women killed in the last couple of years. And you're seeing the placards here as well. And I think that's it from me for the moment. But it's really an honor to be a part of this show. And I will just say, I'm love the intentional work of the Who Will Be Next exhibit that's being held at ROCO now currently. That work really speaks to me as well personally.
Thank you so much, Sylvan. I just want to share a hot take on this idea of health within the United States, that we often don't think about it in terms of safety. I really think safety is intrinsic to our sense of health, whether it's from a chronic disease or from your sense of safety within your environment. This is something that influences our health in the short term and in the long term. And I really think Gays Against Guns in the exhibit, in addition to talking about gun violence itself, I think the underlying idea to it is that idea of safety as health. So on that note, I'm going to dive into more specific questions for all the individual artists. Again, if you have your own questions, please put them into the chat so that we can address them at the end of the session. And so my first question is for Christen. The body is just so present in all three of your series that you've shown Unconditional Care. And I'm really curious as to how do you balance your personal relationship with your own body and everything that it has gone through and is still going through, while simultaneously using it as its own art form and medium to artistically portray specific ideas and use them in such a public way? Is Christen still there with us?
Sorry, I would say that I'm using my
Oh, Christen, your audio is starting to go on us. Could you stop your video?
relationship. I'm working out my personal relationship. So I'm saying that through my work, that I feel kind of inspired by people like Louise Bourgeois, who at one point has said that, you know, she makes work to forget, or people that say, you know, they make work to understand. I'm making the work and to figure out my personal relationship with my body as I'm going through crises, as I'm going through PTSD from rape, as I'm going through treatment from cancer. And I want to show people, I think, what's really happening. That when I see something, it helps me, and I want to be able to help somebody else who's going through that. I get a lot of personal messages saying, like, about the things that I write next to my photos. I've never heard anybody talk about that like this. Or, you know, my doctor won't talk to me about sexuality after cancer. I've tried to, but he doesn't want to, which is certainly something that I had with my double mastectomy. I had to have like 3 appointments, and it was like 20 minutes into the 3rd appointment, and the second doctor, when they finally said erotic sensation about nerve sensation after a double mastectomy, they're like, well, you might get some sensation back. You might get some sensation back. And I was like, what are you talking about? Tell me what you're talking about. I'm talking about sex. Like, I'm talking about like what is happening here. And yeah, it took a long time for someone to even just say the word erotic sensation, which was really painful and hard and made things worse for me as a patient, honestly. So I don't know how I balance it, I guess is the answer. I think it's all a work in progress, just like me.
Well, I appreciate you being so vulnerable for all of us and working it out in real time, not just by yourself, but sort of together. It really gets to that idea of community as a way to help our individual healths and our collective healths. So thank you for that. I'm going to bring my next question to Sylvan. Sylvan, you really elaborated on how you take so much care to create your gag placards, but I was wondering if you can elaborate on your other rules, such as not naming the perpetrators of the violence and why you've made that decision.
Yeah, that's a great question. So GAG doesn't share any information, and we don't name any of the gun perpetrators, and that's particularly less common for the domestic violence, murder, suicide, which unfortunately is really on the rise. The increase of guns in the household, this is kind of anecdotal because it's still kind of new, but I personally have just been shocked by how many murder suicide cases have come across the newsfeed in the last year. And I think that partially then to separate out, you know, it's not exclusively, but it's primarily women who are being killed by husbands, ex-boyfriends, partners, fathers, sons, right? Primarily male people with guns, and sometimes their children as well, and to sort of sort through. And I noticed that every once in a while, People Magazine has a crime page that they sort of update things on, and I'm always struck by the sort of the happy couple photo that includes the person who massacred their entire family, right? And I'm always trying to look for photos that are just a focus on the people who are specifically the victims of that violence. Recently, there were a couple of cases where a female police officer is killed by her police officer partner, and I watched the police departments for talking about their colleagues in a way that seemed different than a couple of years ago, maybe, including police chief saying, I can't talk about him. He murdered this colleague, right? This friend that I knew. And I think so some of that may be a little bit of a cultural change as well. And then the other, obviously the idea of the mass shooting, keeping the name of the mass shooter out of the news media to sort of prevent the kind of terrible hero worship that happens. There are times where, so I moderate a GAG Human Beings Facebook page, where sort of like the AIDS Memorial page, if anyone has followed that account before knows that AIDS Memorial is a Instagram and Facebook page that posts photos and stories of people who died of AIDS. And so the Human Beings page has that kind of idea around gun violence. And there are times where people just share their horrible adoration of the killer on that page. And that involves me sort of, removing their comments and blocking and scrubbing clean the comment section. And that it reminds me about how important it is to really focus on the individuals who were killed through I don't want to say through no fault of their own, because I do avoid this idea of like the innocent victim, or the way that media sometimes honors some lives over others. So I always try to have an even-handedness around gun violence as much as I can, and with the one exception being that we don't include the name of someone who killed someone else with a gun.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more of your process and honoring those lost to gun violence. So my next question is for Holland. Holland, you've done a lot of research that involves understanding how profit-driven the medical implant industry is, and you've uncovered a lot of stories by people who need them and have been affected by it. Can you speak to stories and situations in which the capitalism of medical devices and healthcare has come at the cost of people's health?
Definitely, that's a very good question. In general, access to, surgeries is a privilege that billions of people do not have worldwide. Medical implants are powerful objects. They do have the power to heal and restore the body, but at the same time, they speak to, great hardship and desperation in terms of, inequity, accessibility, and who holds on to the power. So in focusing on medical implants as inspiration and diving into the medical community and, learning a bunch of different stories with speaking with doctors in the medical community, a few of them that come to mind specifically is MedWish, which is a company that has actually donated a lot of medical implants to me. Probably about a decade ago or so, this has since changed. They would be shipping medical implants all over the world, including to quote unquote, developing nations. And since then, there have been so many new regulations that have been put into place that have, quote unquote, put expiration dates on medical implants. So therefore, what this company has done for years, decades to save lives, they no longer can do that. And all of these medical implants and devices are now ending up in landfills, or they're going to metal recycleries, which is just horrible, which, was saving lives before. Now they are not actually making it into different bodies, people that actually need them. One story to me that is completely heart-wrenching. It was like, wow, it really defines how much power such a small object these things could contain, is a story that I had with an orthopedic surgeon who does a lot of humanitarian trips. And this one trip happened to be down in Panama, and they were there with a whole crew of medical professionals, and they were there to perform as many hip replacements as they could within a short span of time. And one of his patients actually informed him that his own mother had had a hip replacement, and that when she had passed, he actually went in and physically removed his own mother's hip replacement because he knew the type of funding and support he could get from it to help feed his family, and knowing that a potential another life that hip replacement could save. And to me, that was like a moment pause, again, in realizing the profound importance that these small objects can have. Or the work also, that's on the screen and that's in this exhibition. A huge inspiration for this body of work was an artist residency that I did in Fez, Morocco. And I was there for about a week, and the person who ran the residency program had informed me that about a week prior, there was a semi-truck that was shipping medical supplies, everything from implants to prosthetics to, essentially bandages. And the truck was hijacked, the driver was shot and killed, and everything within that semi was taken, and it all went onto the black market. Probably, another story that I think is very relevant to what is happening right now here in the United States with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and the amount of women and people with wombs that are going to be affected by this. The fact that your healthcare is being stripped from you. And in the news specifically, they're talking about abortion, but let's not forget that 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 women will have a miscarriage. And DNC surgeries that, are medical needed access for abortions, that same surgery is for miscarriages as well. And there's also need for that surgery for many other medical reasons as well. So what happens now, when millions of people are being stripped of this basic healthcare right, what is this going to end up leading to? Probably, unfortunately, harrowing stories of back alleyway surgeries. Where are these tools and devices? Where are they going to come from? How are people going to get the needed care that they need? And I mean, these are just a few of the stories that I've encountered with speaking with medical, professionals, doctors, orthopedic surgeons, speaking with people that I meet in a gallery setting that, are approaching me about my own work. Implants are powerful objects. They do have the power to heal and restore the body. They speak to, a moment in someone's life, overcoming trauma, healing the body, giving life. But at the same time, they speak to, great desperation that people are going through, hardship. These implants, I feel, as objects embody life and death.
Thank you so much, Holland. That's really powerful, those stories. I want to bring a few more questions quickly to the artists. I know we're running short on time. But Christen, I was wondering if you could elaborate on how you decide what stories and experiences you share on Instagram with your art. How do you decide which surgeries, which good days or bad days, which hospital visits? Yeah, I'd love to hear about your thought process in choosing what to share.
I started hashtagging healthcare as performance art in about, I don't know, maybe 2014, almost 10 years ago. And with my cancers in 2016, I was using that hashtag a lot, and I was writing immediately, writing and posting immediately, writing and posting immediately. This time around, I have not been able to do that. I wait a couple of days. Sometimes I write and post immediately, but I often write something in notes and then actually edit it before I put it on Instagram. I'm definitely pausing more now. And honestly, some of that has to do with the fact that I'm in a 12-step program. After my cancers in 2016, I quit drinking, and I'm a recovering alcoholic, but I was an active alcoholic up till my cancers. And I think of those cancers as a blessing because I was able to get sober. And then only recently, actually, I've been in recovery. And that really just helps me to pause and think what they have some sayings like, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said now? And does it need to be said by me? I don't always think of those things before I make my work, but I do. I try to wait a day or something. And honestly, I just need more personal time for my own healing with my friends this time around. And so I'm actually less public. I'm posting less and trying to be a little bit more careful, conscious, intent, and have more intention about what I am posting. So yes, I would say the answer to that is pausing. Thank you.
Thank you, Christen. That's really insightful. So in the interest of moving forward, I am going to go back to Sylvan from Gays Against Guns. And I just want to lay down some facts right now to preface this question. So to date, there have been over 470 mass shootings in the US just this year, and we're still not done. Rochester has been under a state of emergency for gun violence for over a year now. GAG is constantly holding vigils for the victims of these events. I wanted to know if you, in this process of holding vigils, have you gleaned any insight in how to help stop the senseless violence that's so intrinsic to American culture? I know it's a big question, I'm sorry, but how can people like Gays Against Guns help make the community safer? How can they stand up against this violence? What are some advice to people who might want to get involved in this safety issue and health and epidemic?
It's a great question. And I think that we're seeing actually a tremendous movement from different anti-gun violence groups. Moms has this tremendous, mother-driven activism that's really been taking on some of the, particularly in red states where gun legislation is going into the reducing the restrictions. They've been really showing up. Everytown for Gun Safety, the Newtown Action Alliance are also really great sources to follow. I think that I would say the hardest thing to do is to turn one's attention to paying more attention, right? The instinct is to sort of want to avoid the terrible news around the gun crisis in the country. And I think that there's an isolating fear quality that has not been helping build coalition. And I think that in some ways, groups like Gays Against Guns that use art, performance art a little bit as well, stepping into the gallery like we've had the opportunity to do with the show, is a way to bring that activism to viewers and to participants, maybe in a way that really focuses on, like as the title, this could be you or your family members really easily, right? This is a rising crisis. But I think there are two areas that I would want to make sure that I named as things that are concerns. And one of them is the Supreme Court is conceivably about to claim that domestic violence abusers have a right to their guns, right? That the idea of any kind of gun restriction on anybody is against the founders' ideas of what well-regulated would mean. And I think that we've seen in New York the loosening of the gun attempts to be more restrictive or have been loosened, and that's partially what has opened some of this as well. So I think that things that are a progress sign are the federal background check system seems to be having a very positive influence, particularly on preventing younger people, younger gun purchasers from walking out the door with a gun in their hands, and kind of helping that. And that is definitely reducing some of that. I think that the idea of understanding what your own state is doing to try to protect the lives of its citizens means paying attention to the legislation. In New York, obviously, we're certainly doing a lot of work to do that, but are being blocked kind of by some of the national trends. I call and write my congresswoman about this topic fairly regularly. I'm sure that her office has just basically blocked me, but I do think that there are ways in which if you don't contact your representatives and tell them how important this is, then they are writing off the fact that the majority of Americans would prefer to have really clear gun safety legislation. And I think that's the place where some change is possible if more people become involved. And then I guess the other piece is wounded and the family impact, I think, are often woefully undercared for. So one of the areas I might also suggest is trying to see how one could support the wider web of organizations that are trying to stand up for victims who survived gun violence, as well as the families who've been destroyed by it as well. And I think those are areas that people might feel like they could have some agency as well as making a difference.
Thank you so much, Sylvan. It can seem like such a big issue to address, and it's hard to know where to start. So I appreciate your advice on that. And so my last question is going back to Holland. Holland, when we privately chatted about your artwork, you shared a lot about how these medical devices are really connected to the art history of adornment, and how that's also connected to wealth and privilege. It's really sort of a parallel to what we see happening with the people who need these devices and then gain access to them. I was a little curious if you could elaborate about this idea of adornment and wealth and privilege within your work.
Yeah, so as a metalsmith, of course, I kind of nerd out on this, but the history of jewelry and metalsmithing dates back thousands of years. And I do think that there's a very interesting correlation to how human beings historically adorned their bodies with bones or teeth, whether it be for, status, wealth, or protection, to now I see like people adorning their bodies actually with medical implants. I just think that there is a very interesting correlation that is being made there, that, you're bringing out, the body from within in both senses of historical to present day. Again, for me, it really goes back to how powerful these just objects are in general. And for me, and going through all of my research, I think that that was kind of founded on working through my different connections and realizing, you know, what it takes to even acquire such objects, and even reflecting, you know, down in my home studio where I have just a plethora of all of these devices. And maybe some people in the audience are thinking, well, you have all of these medical implants. Well, at least I can use them. And some of them are perfectly packaged and sealed. They've never even been opened, some of these implants. And I at least get to use them as inspiration, again, to build my work from. Otherwise, these implants would end up in a landfill. So I'm very thankful to have those connections, but just to kind of bring back the legality of it, the forms that I had to sign, right? Because you can't just walk into a hospital and be like, hey, do you have a hip replacement laying around? That would never happen. But in obtaining these different devices, you know, I had to sign a form that I would not melt them down for material costs, the donations, because implants can be solid silver or, you know, titanium. I had to sign a form that I would not sell them on the black market. You know, I have them as inspiration, but these are things that I had to sign, again, reinforcing that power. I had to sign a form that I would not perform surgery on anybody with the objects that were donated to me. But to me, the most extreme, and like, wow, I'm really signing this form, is that I would not perform surgery on anybody with the objects that I am making myself. So to me, that kind of reinforces the power that these objects have, and therefore they just really shouldn't be taken for granted. I hope that answers your full question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. It's such a complex issue. You bring a lot of depth and light to it. So thank you. All right, so that is the extent of my direct questions to the artists. I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. Blue is going to be kind enough to collect those questions and direct them to the artist. I just want to reiterate that Unconditional Care addresses issues of gun violence, rape. Oh, I haven't talked about my work. I'm sorry. Really quick. So my piece in the show is a deconstructed sexual assault kit. It's broken down step by step. And this is part of a series. It kind of fits within two series called In Control and In Whose Defense. And as I was stitching every single modern product related to bodily autonomy, family planning, reproductive health, the product started getting more and more violent. And it was very curious that this started to happen. But I think this idea that the products started to become more and more violent as they relate to violence and sexual assault, it just goes to show that there's a reason why reproductive rights is called the war on women. But what I'm hoping to raise awareness about with this kit is to try to increase empathy for survivors. This kit is meant to try to attain more bodily autonomy, but it's actually very invasive, the process of collecting evidence, that it kind of can help. It doesn't necessarily help that sense of bodily autonomy and justice. And that justice can even be more elusive because there's an extreme backlog of untested kits within this country. Like, we're talking decades of time in terms of backlogs. And that can be extremely hard for survivors to gain a sense of justice, finality to the incident. A lot of these cases will go past the time jurisdiction on cases because of they're untested, and a lot of them won't go to trial. A lot of people refuse to submit themselves to this kit out of fear, out of not knowing their rights to do so, out of thinking that because the system doesn't help process these cases quickly, that there's no point in doing it. It can be very, very complex. So I hope that this kit raises awareness as to what the path to justice can look like, which is complicated. I also hope it helps familiarize people with what these steps are, so that if they're ever in that position, they know what to expect. And hopefully that adds a little bit of comfort, as small as that might be in the moment. And then to raise empathy for people who have gone through that and might go through that, because the statistics for people who will be assaulted is very high. If you go to the exhibit and look at the wall label, it breaks it down. It also offers resources for people who might need them if they find themselves in that situation. So again, to reiterate about unconditional care, it covers issues of Black bodies, representation within the medical industry, the care economy, trans health, chronic illness, maternal death rates, medical implants, gun violence, this idea of safety as health. It really touches upon a lot of different subjects, and in a way that I hope either makes you aware of what other people are going through, and that in itself is enlightening to your understanding of the issue at hand, but maybe it's done in a way that is a health education to yourself. There's a book that Blue put together of a lot of statistics and information on these different issues, very informative. And maybe that you find something that you can personally relate to in it yourself. And that is a source of empowerment and healing for yourself. So please go visit the exhibit if you can. It's up till the 22nd. And again, thank you so much to Rocco for giving me this opportunity to bring the art and all the artists to come and share a little bit about their work.
Yes, thank you, Katrina. So I'm just going to jump in quickly and serve up one question from Emily, which is really a two-part question. Thank you, Emily. And this is directed to Christen. Could you comment on how you explore and utilize different mediums, including photo, film, video, writing, publishing, social media, etc., in part in response to your healthcare need and what is accessible to you as an artist in any given moment? I think the question is about your flexibility and your changing and adapting to different media at the different times.
Thank you for the question. I would say that certainly with social media, it became my art when I was in chemotherapy in 2016. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't get out of bed. I was in a lot of pain. It was the only thing I could do, really, was social media. And so when I was censored and banned from Facebook and things like that, it was really horrible because social media was the only connection I really had to the outside world and to my friends. You know, I was radioactive. You're not supposed to, you know, my kids couldn't use the bathroom after I used the bathroom right away, you know, like stuff like that. Like your body's really turning against you. And so I think in terms of social media, that's what happened. I think partly it also really has to do with my mothering, how old my kids are at any stage, how often, which means like how often I can get to my studio. I was working on a film for a while, and then I kind of lost speed on that. And now I'm back working on that again. So some of it is just like time and work. I teach at the New School. And I think that I'm just trying to figure things out all the time. I think so many of us as artists are questioning things. And I see Sylvan and Gays Against Guns, like looking at like, you know, I feel like part of the work is like, why the fuck is this happening? Like, how can we honor these people? And Holland's work is so interesting with what these implants stand for. A friend of mine just had a hip replacement yesterday. So I think that it really depends on what our resources are in terms of finances, in terms of time. I know Katrina can speak to that as a parent. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this was actually the first time we've displayed work that originated on Instagram. We realized that after putting the work up, that and it diversifies the content of the exhibition so well, just graphically and and the fact that it was digitally born, as it were.
It's a play on performance to me also, because I started in performance. I continue to perform. I do a lot of performance work. And to me, it was like, how can I continue to perform? Like, and how many likes equals like people clapping at me, and sometimes people actually use the clapping emoji and I'm like, yay, what's a standing ovation? What is that performance online? And that people certainly liked, here I'm sexy and cancer had 1 million more likes than here I'm crying and I'm getting lost because of the medicine I'm taking and I have so much brain fog I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you.
so
I wanted to comment quickly a bit more generally about the exhibition and bring up one other issue. As Katrina said, this exhibition addresses so many pressing topics that people in our society are dealing with, and in many cases that the actual artists are dealing with themselves. And I'm glad we didn't really focus too much on the previous iteration of this exhibition, but it does feel like we should, within the context of bodily autonomy and our right to health and wellness in this society, it seems like we should briefly mention the censorship of the previous exhibition to contextualize the wave and possibly the chilling effect in the arts that we're experiencing right now, real time. So I wonder if I could put you on the spot, Katrina, just to circle back and give the real quick overview of what happened with the previous iteration of this exhibition. And currently what viewers are seeing are 3 different installations by 3 different artists that are currently installed at ROCO, but were censored from the previous exhibition and caused quite a stir. And my colleague has just pasted into the chat the link to the article describing some of that context. Katrina?
Right. So what you see in this picture are all the artworks that were censored in Idaho. They all deal with pregnancy and abortion. They're by the object one, with the pills, which is the medical abortion pills. That one is mine. That's in cross stitch. The videos in the center are by Lydia Nobles. And then you can see one on the other side with a little frame around it. It's they're flowers that have been historically used for abortion. Is a letter by Michelle Hartney that was from 100 years ago of a woman begging Margaret Sanger to tell her how not to be pregnant again because she's already had an abortion and it's affecting her health and she can't get pregnant again at her own risk. So Idaho decided, because it was being shown at a state school, the state school decided that to enact the No Public Funds for Abortion Act. The No Public Funds for Abortion Act is meant to stop anything that is promoting, performing, or acting upon abortion. It's really meant to stop the physical act of abortion. It's not meant to stop art or literature or anything else about abortion. But the law was written in a way that is a little vague and very punitive. So anyone who's thought to be committing any of these things are committing a felony and can face up to like 14 years in prison. So the school sort of panicked because they were worried about their funding being pulled. This is my interpretation of their motivations. And so, yeah, they ended up banning all of this work from the exhibition. I tried to have different iterations of it, just saying this work has been removed in accordance with the law, or having just like a black picture over it, et cetera, et cetera. I even tried to ask them to just leave the wall text up, and particularly my wall text, which explains the efficacy of the medical abortion pills and then the state's own law. And the school even said that I couldn't do that. So within a learning institution, they wouldn't even allow basically freedom of information, and it went against their academic policies. So what ended up happening was we went on a big press tour. It got national news. A lot of people were outraged by it. That's when I got in touch with Blue, who was nice enough to reach out to me and offer the place a show in its entirety. But yeah, so this wall and putting all the works together, there's this theme of censored bodies, and what does that mean within the United States? A lot of people, regardless of how you think about abortion, think that these laws are usually just meant to stop the act of abortion, but they're written in a way that is extremely authoritarian and very abusive, where they start to encroach on other rights that are guaranteed to us in the Constitution, and that is the First Amendment. What is scary about this is that regardless of how you feel about abortion, the First Amendment is one of the bedrocks of America. And so it really is a slippery slope where you take one right and it starts to affect the others. So I'm really happy that these works are being shown because they're not incendiary, they're not obscene. They're either rooted in medical fact and objective fact, or they're just women's stories. And it is so dangerous when precedent is set that it's okay to silence people's stories, because that's their personal truth and has to be honored. And the fact that the exhibit decided to silence it is very scary, because this is just their personal histories and experiences. And, what kind of society do we live in when those aren't allowed to be shared? So yeah, I'm very grateful that we're given this opportunity to share them, and please check them out if you're at the exhibit.
Okay, well, I guess we'll end there. Thank you everyone so much for attending. Loaders in Rochester, please come and see the exhibition. It's on through September 22. And those of you who are outside of Rochester won't be able to make it, check out our website. We'll have plenty of installation shots and a few different media. We will also have a recording of this panel discussion today embedded on our website within, give us 4 or 5 days to get it onto our website. Thank you again, Holland, Sylvan, Katrina, Christen, and thank you to all of the artists who have work in this exhibition. And we'll look forward to working with you again soon. Good night.